Having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Porchlight Letters podcast number 2541. Today, it's a pretty cool topic. It is where was your family when they signed up for the draft or enlisted? Now, back during World War I, World War II, and a few other wars in between, Vietnam and all of that, you got drafted. There was a draft that you had to follow, and you had to go register for the draft. Or you could just enlist. I enlisted. There wasn't a draft going on at the time when I joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force. But, in some wars prior to that, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and others, they were drafting people. So think back to if anybody in your family had a military career or fought in any of the wars, did they enlist or were they drafted? And there's some really cool, when you're on Ancestry, you can actually look at draft records. They will look through the US draft records if you've got people that were in the US, and you can see when they signed up. You can see who their next of kin were. On the back of it, if you go to the back of the card, it's got on there their height, their eye color, their skin complexion, their hair color, things like that, sometimes even weight. So you get like a physical description in a way of what that person looked like. On some, there may be a photo, but I haven't typically seen those with the photos. But there has been the odd one or two that has had a photo. So for many families, the decision to enlist or answer the call of the draft was one of the most significant moments in their history. I have to tell you, here in New Zealand, when there was an Air Force Open Day at the RNZAF base, Ohakia, back in February of 1981. And that's when I decided I wanted to join the Air Force. But I wanted to be a pilot. And they didn't allow women to be pilots at the time. And so I wrote this letter to them asking them why women could not be pilots. I really wish I had kept that letter, but I do remember one sentence, and they sent me a very lovely letter. There was several paragraphs on it. But there was one sentence that stood out from the whole thing. And the sentence said, there are some things we have to limit the women in. Now remember, this was back in 1981, before anybody gets up in arms and everything, before they allowed women to be pilots, basically just about anywhere at the Air Force. So I volunteered to become, to join the Air Force. I felt that was where I needed to be. I felt that was where I needed to go. And so that was my goal for the next 3 years. And I had to be 16 and a half on the day of application. That was as soon as I could apply. The soonest I could apply was I had to be 16 and a half on the day of application. And my parents had a form in there that they had to sign because I was under the age of 18 to say that, yes, they agreed and all that, blah, 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 blah. And so the day I worked out the day I was turning 16 and a half, my application was ready to go, and we sent it on in. And then after that, I got an interview to go in and do an interview. I had to go do a physical. So we did all of that stuff. I had to go do some tests and talk with the recruiter and all of that sort of thing too. So I became very well known I became very familiar with the recruiter because I had to see him so many times throughout the thing. And then in November of 1983, I found out that I had been accepted into the Air Force and would be doing my basic training the following year. It wouldn't be the January intake, it may be the one after. I just had to wait and find out. And then we were up in Auckland visiting my grandparents on Easter weekend of 1984, which was the second to last weekend of April. And we got home from that. Now in New Zealand, we get Good Friday off, we get Easter Monday off, and schools get, at that time, got the Tuesday off as well. So we had like a 5-day weekend. And we got home from that, and there was a letter waiting for us, which told me that I had to be on a bus that following Sunday to go off to recruit course, to go off to do my basic training. We called it recruit course. So began my Royal New Zealand Air Force career for almost 6 years. I was in the Air Force for almost 6 years. But it was just one of those things I felt compelled to do, and it was just something that I felt compelled to do. And if I didn't do it, I think I would have regretted it. But I had such a strong urge to go in there that even our guidance counselor was asking me what my backup plan was. If you don't get into the Air Force, what's your backup plan? And I just looked at him and I said, I don't have a backup plan because I am going to get into the Air Force. And he said, well, it's very rare for women to be accepted into the Air Force. What's your backup plan? I said, I don't have a backup plan and this is in front of the other students in school as well, in the class that I was in. And I said, because I am going to be going into the Air Force. And what was really funny to all of that is the guidance counselor came and pulled me out of class that November in 1983 to tell me that I'd been accepted into the Air Force, after telling me that I would not get accepted because women very rarely got accepted. And he was the one that had to break the news to me. And so I went back into the classroom, sat back down, and they all looked at me because my face was kind of weird. And they go, "What's going on?" I said, "I just got accepted into the Air Force." And they were like, "Oh, that's congratulations." Like, "Oh, I haven't told my mum yet." And so I got up out of the class, ran up to the school office so I could call my mum at work, who worked at the doctor's surgery. I had no way to get hold of my dad because he was in a patrol car. So I called her up, and she was my first phone call to tell her that I'd been accepted into the Air Force. So that was pretty cool. But, going back to some of the older generations, some volunteered because they felt it was their duty. Others had their names called through conscription and stepped forward because their country asked them to serve. Whatever the reason, signing those papers marked the beginning of a journey that would change not only their lives, but the lives of everyone waiting for them back home. That single signature often meant leaving behind parents, sweethearts, spouses, children, friends, jobs, and familiar places. Families gathered to say goodbyes at railway stations, ports, and military bases, never knowing how long they would be apart or what the future would hold. It was a day filled with pride, uncertainty, hope, and courage. And these are the ones that were going, they would go off to a basic camp and then straight on and then off to serve wherever they were serving. The decision to serve shaped generations. Some returned with remarkable stories of friendship, resilience, and sacrifice. Others came home carrying memories that were difficult to share. Many families still preserve enlistment papers, service records, medals, photographs, and letters that tell the story of those who answered the call. These moments deserve to be remembered, not only for the history they represent, but for the people behind the uniforms. Every service record belongs to a son, daughter, brother, sister, husband, wife, mother, father, or friend whose choice affected an entire family. It was a little different back in World War I and World War II. Today we have the option. We didn't have to be in a draft. Today we have the option. Back then, because of the wars that were going on, they needed manpower over there to help fight these wars. And so that's why they had the drafts. They started drafting in people. Some people volunteered to go. Some guys lied about their age. They had to be like 18, and some of them were, I think the youngest one they found was like 14. When they discovered that he was not 18, they found out he was 14. There were 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, all saying that they just adjusted their birth date to say, I guess they didn't have to show birth certificates at that time. But there were young teenagers that were signing up saying that they were 18 and going off to fight in wars and things. And your challenge for today, and it was, I felt honored to be able to serve my country in the role that I did. Mine was in peacetime, and I felt honored to be able to do that. I've always had a special place in my heart for the military and veterans. I love sitting and talking with veterans. I absolutely love it. I love to hear their story, the stories that they want to share. I know my grandfather never talked about his days in the war, and I totally respect the fact that he never did. It wasn't until a few years ago that I found, he's been gone since 1986. But it wasn't until a few years ago I found out why. And he had some trauma and it affected him. And so he just didn't want to talk about it. And I understood that, and I was totally okay with that. My grandmother couldn't shut her up about her days in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. She loved to tell her stories, but they were there as a support. They never saw any battles. They never went overseas. They were just here in New Zealand serving during World War II and supporting our troops and stuff from here. And she was a chef, and she taught me a lot and she taught me a lot in the kitchen. I got to spend a lot of hours with her in the kitchen, cooking and baking and learning different things about that. And she would tell me stories from her days in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. But her brother, she had brothers that served. My grandfather had brothers that served as well. My grandfather's father was a captain in the New Zealand Army. And and during World War II, he was the captain at Fort Balance, which was a fort up on top of the hills that overlooked the harbour entry into Wellington Harbour, and he was in charge of that. But my great-grandfather also fought in World War I as well, so he did both. He got to see action, and not sure what action he got to see, but he got to serve in the Royal New Zealand Army, crossing two wars, World War I and World War II. yes, it is a history of service of military service in my family. So I'm very proud of that. And I have a lot of time for veterans. And I love just sitting and listening to them talk, whether they talk about their days, their lives, whatever it is. It's just something to be able to sit down and be honored to be able to sit with them and hear their stories. So your family tree challenge for today is to ask a family member about the person in your family who enlisted or was drafted. Why did they join? How did the family react when they left? Do you have photographs, letters, enlistment papers, medals, or stories that have been passed down? Record those memories today, because behind every military record is a family story waiting to be told. And let us know in the comment and what you find out in the comments below. And with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hei konera.